Hello and welcome to Then and Now, a conversation with Hosea. My name is Derek Hovind. I'm the pastor at Salem Lutheran Church in Orlando, Florida. And for about 26 days or so, I am reading through the entirety of the book of Hosea, reflecting a bit on each section in terms of what Hosea might have been speaking in his time, and then maybe taking some questions from Hosea to speak into our day and our particular journeys as a community of faith and as people of faith. Today we read the entirety of chapter 3. It's the shortest chapter, I think, in the book of Hosea, just 5 verses. Chapters 1 and 2 both had this time of sort of accusation and then this time of hope. And chapter 3 in these 5 verses kind of covers some of that same ground, but in a little bit of a different way. The Lord said to me again, "Go, love a woman who has a lover and is an adulteress, just as the Lord loves the people of Israel, though they turn to other gods and love raisin cakes." So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and a homer of barley and a measure of wine. And I said to her, "You must remain as mine for many days. You shall not play the whore. You shall not have intercourse with a man, nor I with you. For the Israelites shall remain many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or pillar, without ephod or teraphim. Afterward, the Israelites shall return and seek the Lord their God, and David their king. They shall come in awe to the Lord and to his goodness in the latter days." Just as chapters 1 and 2, as I said, covered that ground from accusation to a place of hope, this starts off with a sort of repetition of Hosea's experience of taking this wife that was unfaithful. But it really dwells in some in-between space. In verse 4, we hear that the Israelites shall remain many days without king or prince. So the first couple of chapters, we've talked about the foreseeing of the failure of the monarchy. And then without sacrifice or pillars, so the false gods that they have worshipped, and the ephod and the teraphim go along with that. Those two are going to fail them. But also, if you remember, we talked about the absence of feeling the absence of God's compassion and maybe feeling disconnected from God as well. So that this in-between time for the people of Israel is one where the monarchy has failed, their relationship with God is not where it could be, and the false gods that they have worshipped are not coming through and giving them any sense of comfort, peace, or safety as well. And so it's in that in-between time that this chapter dwells, and then it moves to this verse 5 where it says afterward. So after that in-between time, the Israelites shall return and seek the Lord their God and David their king, and they shall come in awe to the Lord and to his goodness in the latter days. So just as in the first 2 chapters, it makes this movement to a place of hope and trusting that God's goodness is going to come back into their place of unfaithfulness in their worship and in their practices as a community that have been harmful for members of the community who are exploited to serve the purposes of war and all the other political stuff that we saw in chapters 1 and 2. So this quick chapter that lands again in this reassurance of God's love and God's grace that can then invite us, as we have reflected each day, to ask some questions. And I think the question, as we think about the people of Israel in an in-between time, that we can ask today is, how are we in an in-between time? And I think about that as there's times in life where we are oriented and feel like things are going in a good or right direction. We feel like things are perhaps right with the world. And then we can end up in these places of disorientation where it feels like things are in havoc. And then there can be a place of new orientation later. Walter Brueggemann talks about this same movement in the Psalms. And that in-between space where we are not where we used to be, but we're not yet where we're going, can be a challenging place to live. And there's lots of scripture stories that live in that in-between space, including this 3rd chapter of Hosea. So the question that we can take with us this day is, how are we in an in-between place? That is an easy one to look at with the pandemic, but maybe a deeper question for us individually and as church communities is, what ways, aside from that pandemic, might we be in between place with relationships with our faith? And how is it that as the prophet looks forward to God's goodness, might we look forward to God's goodness as well? Tomorrow, we will take a turn then towards chapter 4 and continue with day 8. But thank you for joining me here for day number 7.